The young orc girl gave birth to twins, but they were human. On the night the twins were born, the great stone birthing chamber of the Black Tusk clan went silent in a way no one there had ever heard before. Emily, the young orc noblewoman, feared across the mountain frontier, lay trembling with exhaustion, waiting for the cries that would prove her children belonged to her bloodline. The first cry came soft, the second came weaker. Then the midwife turned toward the firelight, and horror spread across her face. No tusks, no green skin, no sign of orc blood to calm the watching elders. The twins were human. Outside the chamber, whispers moved like poison through the fortress halls. Inside, Emily clutched her newborns to her chest and thought of one man no one was ever supposed to connect to them. John. John lived in a crooked little workshop at the edge of the mountain road, where the human villages thinned out, and the shadow of orc territory began. His home was barely more than a patched wooden shed with a forge pit, a workbench, and a narrow bed beside the wall. He was not a warrior, not a hunter, not a man anyone looked at twice. Most days he repaired broken wheels, mended harnesses, stitched travel packs, and patched iron tools for people too poor to buy new ones. He worked with his hands from dawn until long after sunset, and if anyone remembered him at all, it was usually because he was quiet, reliable, and cheaper than anyone else. People in the villages spoke of orcs with a mix of fear and bitterness. They called them raiders, brutes, mountain devils. John had heard those stories his whole life, but unlike most men, he never sounded brave while repeating them. He had seen what fear did to people. It made them cruel before anything had even happened. So he kept his head down and said very little. He had learned long ago that a poor man survived best by being useful, unnoticed, and careful. Beyond the border ridges, the Black Tusk clan had risen stronger than ever after a bloody struggle for succession. Their banners now flew over the mountain roads, and even human traders had to lower their eyes when passing patrols. Among them, one name carried more weight than the rest: Emily. Though still young, she had already become a figure of fear and respect. She was high-born, battle-trained, and known for the kind of presence that made older warriors step aside. In public she was severe, controlled, and almost impossible to read. To the human settlements below, she was a symbol of everything. Dangerous about orc power, John first entered her world by accident, though it did not feel like one. In the dead of winter, when trade routes were closing under snow, armed riders came for him at night and ordered him to bring his tools. He was blindfolded before the journey ended. When the cloth was finally removed, he found himself deep inside, an orc stronghold standing before an ancient ceremonial cradle carved from black clanwood. Its sides split along a runic seam. No orc craftsman had managed to repair it without damaging the old markings. John was told to fix it, or not leave at all. He worked for hours in silence, his hands steady even while fear sat cold in his stomach. That was when he sensed her watching. Emily stood at the edge of the chamber in dark ceremonial armor, taller than any human woman, broad-shouldered, tusked, and impossible to ignore. Yet there was something strange in her stillness. She was not watching him like a brute measuring prey. She was watching the cradle, watching his hands, watching whether he would treat a sacred thing with care or contempt. John repaired it by patience alone, preserving every carved line. When he finished, Emily stepped closer and inspected the work herself. Their eyes met only briefly, but that moment stayed with both of them. He had expected arrogance. Instead, beneath all that power, he saw fatigue so deep it looked almost lonely. She had expected fear or greed. Instead, she found a man who neither flattered nor trembled more than he had to. That should have been the end of it. But weeks later, John was summoned again, this time in greater secrecy. Emily needed help translating old frontier records tied to bloodlines, inheritance, and forgotten treaties between early humans and orcs. Their meetings remained guarded, practical, and tense. No promises were made, no softness was spoken aloud. Yet in those stolen conversations, something began to shift. John saw that Emily's life, for all its power, was tightly controlled by clan duty, political expectation, and a union she had never truly chosen. Emily saw that John's quietness was not weakness, but a kind of steadiness she had almost never been given. Then came the births. Now, inside the Black Tusk fortress, Emily lay pale and shaking with 2 human newborns in her arms, while the elders whispered of shame, curses, and bloodline ruin. Outside the chamber, suspicion was already turning into danger. And far below the mountain, in his lonely workshop, John heard the first impossible rumor that something had happened in the Black Tusk stronghold, so shocking even the orcs had fallen silent. The rumor reaches John by noon, but he already feels something is wrong long before the riders arrive. The market road is too quiet. The traders who usually grumble and linger near his workshop avoid looking at him. Then the sound of armored mounts breaks the silence, and a Black Tusk escort stops outside his door. No public accusation is made. No explanation is offered. He is simply ordered to come. John understands at once that refusal is not possible. He is taken through the mountain roads under guard, not as a guest, but as a secret being hidden from the world. This time the journey is even colder, more tense, more humiliating. He's kept hooded until he is deep inside the fortress, moved through servant passages and torchlit corridors where even the walls seem to listen. The secrecy tells him everything. Whatever has happened, it is dangerous enough that even his presence must remain unseen. When John is finally brought into a locked inner chamber, the sight before him strips the air from his lungs. Emily is there, sitting upright only by force of will, pale from childbirth, her braided dark hair partly undone, her ceremonial blankets stained and heavy around her. In her arms are 2 swaddled newborns. They are unmistakably human. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. John does not rush forward. He is too stunned, too afraid of what a wrong movement might mean in a place like this. Emily's face is hard, but her eyes are full of sleepless fury and something even worse, fear she cannot safely show to anyone else. When she finally speaks, there is no tenderness in it. She demands whether he understands what he is looking at, whether he understands what this has done to her household, to her name, to the children, to the fragile balance of power around her. John can barely answer. The truth comes over him in pieces, each one heavier than the last. The old records, the hidden meetings, the questions Emily had asked him months ago about bloodlines, rare births, erased treaties. She had already feared something like this was possible. He realizes she had not drawn him back into her life out of carelessness, but because she had seen danger before he had. Emily reveals only what she must. The elder women are divided. Some believe the twins are cursed. Some think they are proof of forbidden weakness. Others want the babies hidden from public sight before sunrise. Her political bond partner Karzug has said little, which frightens her more than rage would. Silence means calculation. If this scandal can be turned against her, he will do it. Her aunt, a rigid traditionalist, is already pressuring the household to remove the children from succession before the clan gathers in judgment. Instead of turning John into a rescuer, place him in the role of the only witness Emily can use. She does not ask him to save her. She orders him to help her think. She needs someone who understands the human side of the old texts, someone patient enough to search what others would overlook. If there is any buried law, any lost precedent, any proof that such children were once recognized, they must find it before her enemies decide the meaning of the twins for them. So John remains in the chamber and the rooms around it, half hidden, half trapped. He watches Emily force herself to stand when the babies cry, watches her refuse to let servants see weakness, watches her command people who are already doubting her. He begins to understand that power has not protected her from loneliness at all. It has made her isolation more complete. Their bond deepens through tense practical work. John sorts old scrolls and clan records brought in secret from the lower archives. He notes damaged seals, missing pages, and altered dates. He calms one of the babies when even the wet nurse hesitates to touch him. He speaks little, but when he does, Emily listens, because he does not waste words. In return, he sees cracks in her armor no one else is allowed to witness. The stiffness in her movements, the anger she uses to hold herself together, the desperate way her hands tighten around the children when footsteps sound outside the door. By the end of this section, they uncover the first real clue, a damaged archive fragment referring to an older treaty line between frontier humans and certain high orc bloodlines, with a brief mention of children born in the shape of alliance rather than the shape of war. But the rest of the record has been cut away deliberately. Someone, sometime in the past, erased the proof they now need most. The fragment changes everything, but not enough to save them. John reads the damaged line again and again by firelight, his thumb holding down the curling edge of the old parchment, while Emily stands over the table, one arm wrapped protectively around herself, the other braced against the wood. The words are faded but clear enough to destroy the lie that has ruled her world for generations. Children like the twins were not unheard of. They had existed before. They had once meant something. But without the missing record, the fragment is only a whisper, and whispers do not survive inside a fortress already hungry for judgment. Emily understands that before John does. Truth alone is never enough in a place built on power. She tells him there is one more place the missing knowledge might still exist. An abandoned border sanctuary beyond the Eastern Pass, where old orc treaty keepers once exchanged records with human monks before the peace between their peoples collapsed. The sanctuary has not been used in decades. Most believe it was burned during the Winter Wars. But Emily remembers something from her lessons as a child, an old map, a forgotten road, a sealed house of memory half hidden in the cliffs. If any copy of the old treaty line still survives, it may be there. She cannot send soldiers, too visible. She cannot send scribes, too easily bribed or frightened. So she goes herself. They leave the fortress before dawn under secrecy so tight, it feels like guilt. Emily travels in plain dark armor, without noble markings, her tusks shadowed beneath a hood, the twins carried in a thick sling and cradle wrap, designed to keep them warm and hidden. John rides beside her on a smaller mountain horse, awkward in the saddle but steady enough, carrying food packs, lamp oil, writing tools, and the wrapped archive fragment. To anyone watching from a distance, they look like a hard-faced orc officer and a low servant escorting goods through the pass. Nothing about them suggests the future of a clan is breathing quietly beneath wool blankets between them. The journey changes their bond more than either of them expects. In the fortress, every word had been pinned under fear, duty, and walls. Out in the mountain silence, there is still danger, but there is also space. The old road climbs through broken stone and wind-carved markers from a time when humans and orcs once traveled under the same protection signs. John notices things Emily does not say aloud. She never sleeps deeply. She checks the twins' breathing more often than she admits. She looks strongest when she is most afraid. Emily notices things too. John never complains about the cold, even when his hands shake. He takes the heavier packs when he thinks she is not looking. He does not crowd her when she falls silent, but he is always near enough to help when one of the babies stirs. There is no romance in the easy sense, no soft confession, no sudden trust, but something more dangerous begins to grow: reliance. 1. Evening they shelter in the ruins of an old watch shrine built into the mountain wall. The ceiling is cracked, and snow dust falls through the stone seams, but the place still bears faded carvings of both human and orc hands pressed side by side in ritual pigment. John studies them in the firelight, while Emily feeds one of the twins. He says almost to himself that maybe the world was not always as broken as they were taught. Emily answers more sharply than she means to, saying the world was always broken. Some people were simply allowed to forget it longer than others. But later, when the child sleeps, she tells him the truth. She has never spoken plainly. She had known from the first signs of pregnancy that something was wrong with the story her clan would force onto the children. She had searched the old blood records not to erase him, but because she feared what would happen if the babies looked like him. She feared they would become proof against her before they were ever allowed to become people. John asks quietly whether she would have told him at all if the twins had been born looking orc. Emily does not answer at once. That silence hurts more than if she had lied. The next day, they reach the sanctuary, a half-buried stone structure carved into the cliffs, protected not by walls but by obscurity. The main doors are split, the ironwork rusted, the human script over the arch nearly erased by ice and time. Inside, rows of collapsed shelves and water-damaged chests fill the chambers. The air smells of dust, salt, and old ash. It is a dead place, but not an empty one. Here, the story widens. They search through ruined treaty ledgers, cracked votive tablets and wax-sealed cylinders never meant for ordinary eyes. John becomes indispensable, not because he is strong, but because he is careful where others would rush. He knows how to lift brittle parchment without destroying it. He recognizes older human legal phrasing. He spots where later hands scraped out names and dates. Emily, for all her rank, begins to follow his method rather than command over it. That shift matters. Respect between them becomes real. They find references to the first boundary peace, a forgotten era when certain high orc houses and frontier human families bound trade, land, and mutual defense through oath lines stronger than marriage contracts. In those years, children born between them were not treated as shameful accidents. They were called bridge heirs, living proof that peace could have blood and a future. But later rulers on both sides buried the custom. Orc nobles feared blurred succession. Human priests denounced mixed blood as disorder. The old alliance had not died naturally. It had been erased because it threatened systems of purity, rank, and control. The discovery should feel hopeful, but the emotional conflict sharpens instead. Among the records, John finds a sealed note in Emily's hand, older than the twins' birth, written during her pregnancy. It is a contingency instruction. If the children are born visibly human, he is to be given payment, removed quietly and never named. She had planned for his disappearance before she planned for his place beside them. When he confronts her, Emily does not deny it. She says she had no safe path, that keeping him near would have marked him for death, that in her world, protection often looks like cruelty. But John hears only one thing at first. She had been ready to let him vanish from his own children's lives before he even knew they existed. The fracture between them is immediate and painful. He accuses her not angrily, but with the flat hurt of a man who has spent his whole life being useful only until he becomes inconvenient. Emily, exhausted and cornered, lashes back that he still does not understand what power costs, what a woman in her position must calculate, how little mercy her world gives to mistakes. The argument does not explode into melodrama. It becomes colder than that. Two people who have grown close enough to wound each other precisely. Before they can repair the damage, danger arrives. In the sanctuary's lowest chamber, behind a stone ledger niche, they recover the missing document at last, a preserved treaty confirmation bearing both orc blood seals and human witness marks. It explicitly names children of certain joined lines as lawful heirs under ancient frontier compact, regardless of outward form, so long as they are acknowledged by the parent of the high blood. The proof is real, powerful, potentially enough to force a reckoning inside the Black Tusk clan. Then Emily hears it first, boots on gravel above the chamber, more than two moving carefully. They are no longer alone. Karzug's allies have tracked them through the pass, and by the way the sounds spread near the entrance, they are not here to argue over history. They are here to make sure no one carries it home. They do not die in the sanctuary. That is not because fate spares them, and not because John suddenly becomes something he is not. It is because Emily knows the sanctuary better than the men above expect, and John knows how to think under pressure when stronger people panic. Together, not gracefully but desperately, they escape through a lower record tunnel used long ago to carry sealed treaty chests beneath the cliff. It is narrow, half-collapsed and black with old dust. Emily carries one twin against her chest, John carries the other, and the wrapped treaty record beneath his coat. They move in silence, except for the baby's strained little breaths and the pounding steps echoing behind them. By the time they emerge into the ravine below, the mountain wind is cutting and wild, and whatever fragile peace existed between them has not returned. They are still wounded from the argument, still raw from the truth each has forced the other to face, but there is no room now for pride, only choices. They ride through the night toward Black Tusk territory because there is nowhere else left to go. If they run farther, they become fugitives with infants in winter, hunted by both clans and bordermen. If they return, they walk straight into judgment. Emily understands before John says it. The twins cannot be saved in shadows anymore. The proof they carry is too dangerous to hide, and the scandal has already begun to grow beyond anyone's control. Silence will only let others shape the story first. When they reach the stronghold, dawn is already staining the highest stone towers red. But the fortress they return to is not the one they left. Word has spread. The main gates are crowded with armed clan sentries. Inner fires burn in the ceremonial hall. Black banners of mourning and challenge hang together, a sign that blood, law, and power are being weighed in the same breath. The twins' existence has become more than family shame. It is now a political crisis. John is not brought in beside Emily. He is seized the moment they pass through the lower gate. Her authority still carries weight, but not enough to shield him openly. Some warriors want him killed before he can speak. Others want him exposed before the elders as living proof of her dishonor. He is dragged away through stone corridors and locked behind an iron-barred holding chamber, usually reserved for oath-breakers waiting judgment. Through the narrow opening, he can hear the fortress moving around him like a living thing. Boots, shouted orders, distant horns, the rising hum of a hall filling with people ready to decide the fate of children who have not even opened their eyes to the world properly. Emily, meanwhile, is forced into the role she has feared since the births. She must stand before her clan, not only as a mother, but as a high-born woman whose body has produced a public contradiction no amount of strength can hide. Her aunt leads the accusation with cold, ceremonial precision. The twins, she says, are a threat to order. If recognized, they will stain succession and divide the clan for generations. Karzug is quieter, which makes him more dangerous. He speaks not with outrage, but with reasoned concern, asking whether a leader who hid the truth, concealed a human father, and endangered the bloodline can still claim the right to rule. Emily does not break, but for the first time her power no longer commands the room by itself. Too many eyes are measuring weakness, too many allies are hesitating. From confinement, John realizes something that cuts deeper than fear. The treaty record may prove the twins are lawful, but law alone will not save them. This hall is not only asking what is true, it is asking what kind of future it is willing to allow. And truth in a room like that is rarely enough without someone willing to bear its cost openly. He thinks of the babies. He thinks of Emily standing alone beneath banners and judgment. He thinks of the life he could still choose. The old, small, invisible life where no one knew his name. Then he understands with brutal clarity that hiding now would be another form of abandonment. At the height of the ceremonial hearing, when the elders demand whether any human man will be named in this disgrace, the chamber doors open. John steps inside. He is pale, exhausted, visibly terrified, and still unmistakably ordinary in a hall built for power. No armor, no title. No weapon, just a poor human craftsman walking into the center of an orc clan's anger because he can no longer let silence decide who his children are. The hall erupts at once, shouts, curses, hands moving toward blades, elders rising to their feet. And across the chamber, Emily turns toward him, her face changing in a way no one there has ever seen. Not rage, not command, fear for him. The hall breaks into noise the moment John steps forward. Warriors shift around the outer ring with their hands near their blades. Elder women begin speaking over one another. Someone near the back spits the word human like an insult. Torchlight trembles over black stone pillars and iron braziers, throwing the clan banners into restless shadow. In the center of it all, John stands exposed and badly out of place, a poor man in a room built for bloodlines, strength and fear. He looks as though one harsh breath could drive him to his knees. But he does not kneel. Kazug is the first to recover his voice. He steps forward with the calm of a man who has waited for this exact disaster. He does not shout. He does not need to. He speaks with that dangerous softness that makes outrage sound reasonable. He calls John a contaminating influence, a hidden stain brought too close to the clan's inner line. He asks the elders whether Black Tusk law means anything if a nameless human can creep into the blood of its ruling house. He turns, slightly, not even looking at the twins as he speaks, and says that if weakness is not cut away quickly, weakness becomes inheritance. The words land where he wants them to land. The hall is already frightened. Frightened clans are easy to steer. John feels all of it pressing toward him, the contempt, the suspicion, the hunger for a simple enemy. For one terrible moment he nearly says nothing at all. He is not a hall speaker. He's not clever with a noble language. He has no polished defense. He only has the truth, and truth in such a place feels painfully small. Then one of the twins begins to cry. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. Just the thin, helpless cry of a child whose whole existence has already become an argument among powerful people. And that sound steadies him. When John speaks, his voice is rough, but it carries. He says he has no title to offer the hall and no wish to insult its laws by pretending to stand above them. He says he is exactly what they see. A craftsman, poor, ordinary, and from the lower road villages below the mountain. He does not try to make himself impressive. He does not claim Emily was helpless before him, or that he somehow overcame her. Rank. He speaks plainly enough that the simplicity itself becomes a kind of force. He says the children are not curses. They are not plots. They are not weapons. They are children. If blame is needed, let it fall on the adults who made choices in fear, loneliness, and silence. But let no one stand in that hall and call newborns shame because they do not look the way power expected them to look. The room does not soften, but it changes. Not much, just enough, because John is giving them no easy lie to crush. He is not boasting. He is not begging for elevation. He is not trying to steal place or honor. He is standing there fully aware of how small he is in their eyes and refusing to let that smallness become cowardice. Emily watches him in silence, and something inside her shifts. All her life, Strength has meant distance, command, control, never allowing anyone to see what could be used against her. She has survived by becoming harder than the room around her, harder than the elders, harder than the men who thought marriage could turn her into a banner they carried, harder than fear. But now, in the center of the clan, the one person with the least reason to stand beside her has chosen to stand anyway. Karzug sees the room wavering and moves to seize it back. He demands the old treaty record. When it is brought forward and read aloud, the hall grows tense in a different way. The words are ancient, but unmistakable. Children born of certain high bloodlines and bound under the first frontier compacts are lawful heirs, regardless of outward form, if acknowledged by the high blood parent. The record names such children, not as corruption, but as treaty-born, bridge heirs, living proof that peace once took flesh. Karzug attacks at once. Old law, he argues, is not living law. Dead rulers wrote dead agreements. The present clan does not answer to forgotten weakness, hidden in crumbling sanctuaries. He warns that if the twins are recognized, other clans will mock Black Tusk. Rivals will challenge succession. Human border lords will use the scandal to meddle in mountain affairs. He turns to the elders and asks the most dangerous question of all. Even if the law permits these children, will the clan survive them? That question hangs like smoke, because it is not foolish, it is not evil in a simple way. It is political, practical, and cruel in the way all strong systems become cruel when faced with change. Emily steps forward before anyone else can answer. She does not raise her voice at first. That makes the hall lean toward her. She stands tall, despite the exhaustion still living in her body, one hand resting near the swaddled twins, the other open at her side instead of clenched in command. She says Black Tusk has spent years calling itself the strongest clan in the mountain provinces. If that is true, then its strength cannot depend on the shape of a child's face. She says the hall has been trained to think blood is pure only when it is narrow, controlled, and convenient. But the record proves otherwise. The clan's own foundations were laid in a time when strength meant keeping peace across difference, not erasing it. Then she says the thing no one expects. She says this history was not forgotten because it was shameful. It was buried because it threatened those who needed clean bloodlines and simple enemies to keep power stable. Orc rulers buried it, human rulers buried it, priests and war chiefs and heirs buried it. Not because children like these were unnatural, but because they made ownership of land, title, and loyalty more complicated than the powerful could bear. The words strike the room harder than accusation would have, because now the issue is no longer just her children. It is the clan's memory of itself. Her aunt rises, furious, calling the speech reckless, calling Emily blinded by maternal madness. But before she can seize the floor, an older voice cuts across the hall. It belongs to War Matron Siraka, a scarred elder who has not spoken once through the proceedings. She is one of the last keepers of oral lineage, old enough to remember songs that were already considered ancient when Emily was a child. Slowly, with the hall falling silent around her, she confirms that she has heard fragments of this truth before. Not from books, but from blood memory recitations spoken only in winter rites. Bridge airs were real, the first peace lines were real, and Black Tusk's earliest claim over the eastern roads did not come through conquest alone, but through sworn kinship across the frontier. The hall changes then, not into acceptance, not into warmth, but into something more dangerous to old lies, uncertainty. Karzug realizes he's losing ground and moves for one last strike. He offers a compromise that is no compromise at all. Let the twins live, he says, but unnamed, unranked, hidden from succession, raised quietly, spared public shame while the clan preserves order. It is a graceful cage and everyone knows it. Emily looks at the children. then at John, then at the hall that has measured her whole life in usefulness. And she makes the choice the story has been moving toward from the beginning. She formally acknowledges the twins under the old treaty line, not in private, not in apology, in full hearing of the clan. She speaks their names into the hall and binds them to her blood publicly, invoking the ancient compact and daring anyone present to deny both law and memory at once. Gasps move across the chamber. Her aunt looks stricken. Kazug goes white with fury. The decision does not solve the crisis. It makes concealment impossible. But that is exactly the point. What can no longer be hidden can no longer be quietly erased. Then comes John's choice. One of the elders, trying to stabilize the moment, suggests that he be given a ceremonial title, a convenient fiction, some lesser noble attachment to make his existence easier for the clan to swallow. It is a polished way of saying that he may stay only if he is transformed into something respectable enough to fit their story. John refuses, not arrogantly, not with insult. He says he will not take a false name to make his children less ashamed of his real one. He is what he is, a craftsman, a human, their father. If the clan means to recognize the children, then let it recognize the truth that made them. Anything less is only a finer kind of hiding. That refusal lands more deeply than another speech could have, because it strips the room of one last excuse. War matron Saraka rises once more and declares the matter binding. The twins are recognized under ancient law. Their place may be disputed in practice, challenged in council, resented in whispers, but it is now protected in name, and no blade may be lifted against them without lifting it against the clan's own foundation. No one cheers, but no one can undo what has just been spoken. The hall settles into a hard, uneasy silence. Then Emily does one final thing. Before the elders, before the warriors, before every hostile eye in Black Tusk stone, she crosses the space between herself and John and stops hiding him from the shape of her life, not as servant, not as tolerated witness, not as a secret mistake dragged into daylight. She stands beside him openly, with their children between them, and lets the entire clan see what choice looks like when fear no longer rules it. That is the moment the old order truly cracks. Not because love conquers everything, not because the room becomes kind, but because what was meant to be buried has survived long enough to be named. The recognition of the twins did not bring peace to Black Tusk. It brought a pause. That was the first truth John learned in the weeks that followed. No one tried to seize the children again. No elder openly challenged the ruling war matron Saraka had sealed in the hall. No blade was raised against Emily or the infants. The law had spoken too clearly for that, but law, John discovered, could force silence long before it could create acceptance. The stronghold changed around them in careful, uncomfortable ways. Some servants obeyed with lowered eyes and stiff hands. Some warriors stared at the twins as if looking too long might reveal something monstrous. Others, especially the older women who had seen enough loss to distrust certainty, watched with wary curiosity instead of contempt. The children had been protected, but not embraced, and still that was enough to begin. John was given rooms within, Emily's household, though not in the center of power, and not as any polished version of what the clan might have preferred. He remained what he had always been, a working man with calloused hands, quiet habits, and no gift for pretending to be more grand than he was. He repaired broken latches, rewound damaged harness straps, copied records too fragile for careless scribes, and slowly learned the rhythm of a fortress where strength was measured loudly, but tenderness survived in hidden corners. Some found that insulting. Others found it harder and harder to dismiss him. He never tried to conquer the space. He simply kept proving, day after day, that he could belong without performing power. Emily's life changed more painfully. She kept her rank, but at a cost. Allies who once followed her without hesitation now calculated every public association. Marriage offers from other houses vanished. Traditionalist elders watched her more closely than before, waiting for any sign that her judgment had softened into weakness. Even victories in council came slower. She had not been stripped of power, but she had narrowed her future by choosing truth openly. The clan would never let her forget that, and yet she was freer in ways power had never granted her. For the first time, she no longer had to divide herself into separate versions. The feared daughter of Black Tusk in one room, the exhausted mother in another, the guarded woman with secret love hidden in shadows. The price of openness had been real, but so was its relief. She did not have to lie every time she looked at John. She did not have to pretend the twins were anything other than hers. The children grew through their first months under watchful eyes. They remained visibly human, soft-faced and tuskless, but little signs began to unsettle old certainty. Their grip was stronger than expected. Their sleep was lighter. Their gaze, when fixed on movement, carried an eerie steadiness that made even seasoned orc nurses pause. They did not fit neatly into either world's assumptions, and that, in time, became its own quiet kind of power. Change came slowly, not in speeches but in habits. A nurse who once flinched at touching them learned how quickly they calmed to an orc cradle song. A gate guard who had muttered about impurity once found himself carving a tiny wooden wolf for one of them without understanding why. Even the fortress itself began to hold their existence less like a scandal and more like a fact no one knew how to undo. As for John and Emily, love did not become easy simply because it had survived the Hall. They still carried the wounds of secrecy, fear, and class difference. There were nights when John wondered whether he would always be tolerated more than accepted. There were days when Emily's old instincts returned, making her sound colder than she meant to be, as if distance was still the safest language she knew. But now, when hurt rose between them, it did not disappear back into silence. They spoke, sometimes badly, sometimes after too long, but they spoke. Their bond had been built through pressure, not fantasy, and that gave it a harder, steadier shape than longing alone ever could. What their love cost them was simple to name and impossible to measure fully. It cost Emily political ease, clean, alliances, and the future her clan had designed for her. It cost John the safety of being forgettable. It cost them both the possibility of belonging untouched inside the worlds that made them. But what it gave them was something neither had possessed before, a life chosen openly, even under judgment. In the final scene, dawn spreads pale gold over the high courtyard above the mountain roads. The air is cold, and the clan banners move, heavily in the wind. Below the fortress, the human settlements lie faint in the distance. Behind them, the stone spine of orc territory rises dark and ancient. Emily stands near the parapet with one twin in her arms. John stands beside her with the other child held carefully against his chest. The babies are small, human-faced, and quiet in the morning light. No one hides them. For a long moment, the four of them stand between two worlds that still do not know what to do with them. Then one of the twins reaches out with a tiny hand and catches hold of the black fur trim on Emily's shoulder, while the other curls his fingers into John's rough collar at the same time. Human hand, orc mother, human father. One shared dawn, and above the divided land below, the future does not look certain, but it looks possible.